Hello, welcome to Compare Labs. In this video, you're gonna see the full comparison of Chicago and New York. So, let's begin. Chicago was founded in 1833. New York was founded in 1624. Chicago has 606 square kilometers landmass including territories, while New York has 1,214 square kilometers. In terms of population, 2.9 million people live in Chicago, while the number is 8.5 million in New York. According to the official data, women population of Chicago is 51.5% and New York has 52.51% women population. Male population in Chicago is 48.5%. Male population in New York is 47.49%. As of 2022, Chicago's overall population density is 4,447 people per square kilometer, whereas population density is 1,194 people per square kilometer in New York. Annual population growth rate of Chicago appears to be 13%, while 0.9% in New York. Now let's look at median age of population in these two cities. In Chicago it is 33.1 and in New York it is 35.5. We all know that Facebook is a part of our lives. In Chicago, 50.7% of people use Facebook, whereas it is 52% in New York. Now let's see the unemployment rate in both cities. Chicago has 10.3% of unemployment rate, while New York has 4.3%. The average salary in Chicago is $5,630.94. The average salary in New York is $6,038.32. While the rent for a one-bedroom apartment is $1,842.6 in Chicago, it is $3,279.87 in New York. A single person spends approximately $1,035 in a month in Chicago, whereas it is $1,383 in New York. What about monthly cost of utilities? It is $162 in Chicago, while those utilities cost $165 in New York. Three-bedroom apartment costs $3,565 in Chicago. It costs $6,577 in New York. A family of four living in Chicago spends approximately $3,722, whereas the same expense is about $5,095 in New York. Now let's learn the monthly payment a family needs to make for a kindergarten. A full day in a preschool costs $1,740 in Chicago and $2,312 in New York. A value-added tax paid in Chicago is 10%, whereas it is 8.8% in New York. Chicago is in the 49th rank with regards to quality of living, while New York is in the 44th rank. Now let's move to the average prices of some products in these cities. 1 liter of milk costs $0.79 in Chicago and $1.20 in New York. A person pays $3.68 for a kilogram of rice in Chicago, whereas it costs $7.33 in New York. A kilo of apple, banana and orange respectively cost $5.39, $1.67 and $3.11 in Chicago, while the same amount costs $5.39, $2.71 and $4.93 in New York. The costs of a kilo of onion and tomato are $5.86 and $3.86 in Chicago, and $3.66 and $2.16 in New York. 1 liter of fuel costs $0.87 in Chicago, while $0.84 in New York. If you want to drink Coke or Pepsi, you need to pay $2.2 in Chicago and $2.39 in New York. Or if you like to drink beer, you'll pay $3.8 in Chicago whereas $3.15 in New York. A mid-range of wine costs $13.75 in Chicago while it is $15 in New York. If internet has an importance in your life, then you will pay $58.96 in Chicago or $65.15 in New York. The average temperature you can see is 11 degrees Celsius in Chicago and 14.2 degrees Celsius in New York. When it comes to humidity, we can see 70% in Chicago while it is 68% in New York. Calculated green area per capita in Chicago is 42.74 square meter whereas it is 13.56 square meter in New York. If you like traveling by plane, there are 2 airports in Chicago and 3 airports in New York. If the number of hospitals is a criteria for you to move to a city, you will find 90 of them in Chicago and 214 in New York. The number of theaters and cinemas show how cultured a city is. You will see 638 cinemas in Chicago and 492 cinemas in New York. There are 55 museums in Chicago and 89 museums in New York. If you can't help playing sports, there are 5 sport facilities in Chicago whereas there are 3 of them in New York. $46.3 million tourists visit Chicago every year whereas 55 million tourists visit New York. There are 54 international embassies in Chicago. New York has 116 of them. If you are single in Chicago, you pay $2.50 for a transportation ticket. If you are in New York, the price is $2.75. If you want to buy a monthly ticket, it costs $105 in Chicago whereas it is $129 in New York. Average commuting time in Chicago is 33.2 minutes. Average commuting time in New York is 45.5 minutes. There are 13 billionaires in Chicago whereas the number of billionaires is 92 in New York. In Chicago, people have a concern level of 2.55 out of 10 at night while New York has 5.05 level of concern. What about the safety level during the day? People give 5.58 out of 10 in Chicago whereas they give 7.32 out of 10 in New York. The concern level of people about getting their belongings stolen from the car is 6.54 out of 10 in Chicago while the same concern level is 4.65 out of 10 in New York. People in Chicago give a rating of 5.52 out of 10 about their concern level on getting their car stolen whereas the same concern level is 3.72 out of 10 in New York. The level of concern about burglary is 5.63 out of 10 in Chicago. Same level of concern is 3.87 out of 10 in New York. The quality of drinkable water is measured as 6.67 out of 10 in Chicago. It is 7.12 out of 10 in New York. People in Chicago pay $1.99 in shops and $1.65 in restaurants to a bottle of water whereas the same bottle of water in New York costs $2.35 in shops and $1.93 in restaurants. If you want to go somewhere by a taxi, the base fee is $3.25 and kilometer charge is $2.11 in Chicago. The base fee is $3.50 and kilometer charge is $1.86 in New York. Thank you for watching and stay in tuned for our next videos.